All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us today. We are the Creative Careers team, and today we're going to be chatting a little bit about how to share your work with confidence. My name is Eilish Russell. I am the Associate Director of Career Advising at the Creative Careers team, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Kayla Carrillo, who is our Career Pathways Advisor, and I'm going to kick it right over to her to start us off on our presentation today.
Great. Thank you, Eilish. Again, my name is Kayla. I am new to Art Center. I am the new advisor here. I'm really happy for everyone that's joining. So to talk about our topic, why it's important, you're going to be talking about your work in numerous contexts over the course of your life and your career. Just some examples here are when you have in-class presentations, in an interview setting or grad show, when you're pitching a meeting within freelance and creative entrepreneurship. These are just some of the various aspects in which you could be talking about your work. All right, just to give a little bit of context to the agenda for today. So are going to be covering storytelling, why your story matters, your creative voice, talking about your work with confidence, and lastly, sharing work online. All right. So this is just some message that we want you to keep in mind as we're going about our workshop today is you are more than your work. Your story gives you a unique design and a unique impact. And then just a little bit about storytelling. When it comes to storytelling, stories have obviously a beginning, a middle, and an end. They also have a unique point of view. They could have connections between the parts of the story. They could have specific details that you want to highlight. And another aspect to consider when you're talking about storytelling is you have to adapt your storytelling to fit your circumstances slash purpose and also your audience. And so I'm going to be kicking it off to Eilish to talk about that.
Thanks so much, Kayla. So, when we're thinking about storytelling, I want us to think about this idea of a collection of images versus a story. So, right now on the screen, we're looking at a collection of images, right? We have four pictures here that look like kind of related, kind of unrelated. So, I want you to picture that I have just gone on vacation. I just went to Mexico and I'm coming back and having lunch with a friend, and I'm showing her pictures of my trip. And so I say, here is a market, swipe. Here is the delicious fruit and vegetables at the market, swipe. Here is a beach, swipe. And here's a sunset. So my friend knows exactly what I just told her, but nothing more really. And if I had just given her my phone or sent her those pictures in a text, she would have gotten the exact same amount of information about those images as she did when I said them out loud to her, right? However, let's say that I said to her, we're having lunch, we're having a great time. Oh my goodness, my recent trip was so wonderful. I felt so relaxed, and it was just such a fantastic experience. On my last day there, we woke up late and I left my hotel and went down to the market that was a couple of blocks away. And we strolled around for a couple of hours and bought some fresh produce. And everything tasted so perfect and fresh and delicious. And so we bought some things to go and we kept walking around and found our way to this tiny little beach. It was completely deserted. We were there all by ourselves and we had the whole waterfront just for us. And so we sat down with the produce that we bought at the market and had our lunch on the beach, looking out at this perfect blue ocean. And we stayed there for so long because we were having such a great time that we even got to see the sunset. And it was the perfect end to my last day on the trip and really encapsulated everything about it that I was looking for. I wanted relaxation, I wanted peace, and I wanted to be able to do anything that I wanted over the course of the day. And I'm just so glad that I was able to capture these memories and be able to share this specific story with you. Now, based on the information that I just told my friend, she knows not only what I did on my last day or maybe over the course of my vacation, but she knows how it made me feel. She knew what the purpose of me taking and capturing these photos was. She knows what they mean to me now and how I approach vacations in general, right? Now, this might all seem a little bit silly in the context of talking about our work, but I want us to think about this set of images as kind of analogous to a set of images of our work or a set of assets that are related to a project that we're sharing. We don't just want to put up a series of images and say, this is a prototype, this is my research, this is my sketch. We want to be able to string a connection between all of those images, all of those aspects of our work, so that our audience, whether that is our faculty in the classroom, an interviewer, a team of designers hearing our pitch, or anybody else can understand why we did what we did, where our work comes from, so what the inspiration is, and why it is meaningful and important. So I want us to keep that kind of picture in mind as we go through the rest of our presentation today to really understand what our long-term goal is. So let's talk a little bit about why your story matters as we start to think about all of these aspects of a story. First and foremost, people remember stories. They don't necessarily remember a specific product or a specific image, but they do remember the story that you told, why your design is important, what problem it solved, or even perhaps what it made them feel. Stories help build connection. They give meaning and they establish trust between you and the people that you're sharing your story with. You don't necessarily need something dramatic, right? The story that I just told about those four images was a little bit dramatic. I talked about how, this was the perfect day and everything was exactly what I wanted. And that's a lot of, intensity for a specific set of images. We don't necessarily need all of that drama. We just need to understand our why behind our work and why we're sharing it with other people. And finally, sharing our process really adds power to the pieces that we're sharing, to why we're sharing our work at the beginning, and why the people that we're speaking with should be paying attention to all of that. So, let's talk a little bit about your creative voice, right? Your creative voice is what makes you you, and your creative voice is where your story starts. So, defining and then refining your creative voice is something that you're going to do 100 times over the course of your career. Right now, we have some term 4 students, we have some term 6 students, we have probably folks who are earlier and later than that. And I feel pretty confident saying that you will have changed and adapted and grown your creative voice numerous times since you started your journey at Art Center. So your creative voice is going to evolve and change as your work, as your interests evolve. But it always is at the heart of your story. Whatever your story is, your creative voice is at the heart of it. And that might include talking about the evolution of your work, talking about how your interests have changed and grown as you have done new things and had new experiences. But we always want to start with our creative voice. So I want to encourage us to start by trying to answer some of the following questions when we're identifying our creative voice. And maybe some of you have already done this in a class where you're making your portfolio website and writing an about me. Or for those of you who are preparing to graduate, maybe as you're thinking about your grad show website, you're answering some of these questions. But if you haven't yet, these are a really great place to start. So who are you and where are you located? And that's a really baseline question. Who are you? And then where do you do your work, right? Where you do your work can impact how you do your work in a lot of ways. So what do you do and what do you make? What you do and what you make, again, hugely impacts, the type of work that you do. And this could be something really specific. I make, or I am a character designer, and I make characters that are anthropomorphic and deeply inspired by my love of Miyazaki movies. Or it could be something really general. I am an illustrator and I make designs that help people feel a connection to grief, right? Those are two different approaches to answering that same question. Then, what inspires you? Where does your interest in design come from? And what inspires you as you're going about your day? Are you inspired by the people in your life? Are you inspired by the nature that you interact with? Are you inspired by sustainability or another kind of personal interest cause that you feel is really important and that your design work is able to support? Then, what are your unique skills? And kind of where do your characteristics of your work meet those unique skills? So maybe you have an incredible eye for color and you really love color. And so your work is notably different than perhaps your peers or other folks that you've met for the way that you use color. Maybe you're really passionate about the super fine details. And so everything that you design and make is perfectly detailed. It is intricate, it is maximalist, or something along those lines. And finally, if writing out all of these things kind of makes it a little bit difficult for you to identify what's that creative voice, you might want to start with your work. Sometimes it's easier to start with our work than it is to start with ourselves. So we might pick a piece of work that's really meaningful to us, something that we feel has been deeply inspired by our own interests and not just something that we've done for a class, though that's helpful too. And we might try to ask ourselves, why did I create this? Right? Where did this interest come from? What was the brief that I was responding to, but also why did I create this specific piece of work? What inspired it? Was there research that you did that inspired it? And why did you tackle the research that way? Was it inspired by true personal interest, like this was a non-academic project that you were excited to explore? Or was it something that you found was meaningful based on your interactions with other people? And then, of course, what part of you is in this particular piece? Is it a character that you wish you had seen and been able to interact with when you were a child? Is it an object or an item that you made because you wanted and you feel that it would be helpful in the world? Did you design a car that is deeply inspired by the design characteristics that you grew up with? Or something along those lines, right? What are the aspects of you personally, and again, that inspiration, that background, your unique skills that show up in this particular work? And I want us to look at an example of what this creative voice can look like. And this is within the form of what we might call an about me or an artist bio. But again, you're going to use this in a lot of different contexts. We just have it in text form in this particular case. So our example here, and I'll read it out loud. I'm a multidisciplinary artist exploring memory, identity, and the weird little ways we hold on to meaning. My work lives somewhere between illustration, collage, and storytelling. I'm drawn to textures, color palettes that feel like deja vu, and the tension between digital and handmade. A lot of what I create starts with the question, what if this feeling had a shape? I grew up bouncing between cultures and cities, which shows up in how I layer materials and symbols from different worlds. I'm especially interested in visual storytelling as a way to process personal history, both mine and the communities that I belong to. Outside the studio, I'm probably journaling, overanalyzing movie posters, or hunting down vintage type. Now, this is a lot, right? And again, this is what we might see specifically show up in an artist bio, But I want us to break it down and share how this brings in elements of that creative voice. So first, we start by identifying what we do and who we are. So multidisciplinary artist. We do illustration, collage, and storytelling. What inspires us? I'm exploring memory, identity, and the ways that we hold on to meaning. I'm asking the question, what if this feeling had a shape? What are some of the unique characteristics of my work? I'm drawn to textures and color palettes and the tension between digital and handmade. I also layer materials and symbols from different worlds based on the cultures and the cities that I grew up in. All of these are aspects that, again, might show up in and about me, but are also what you can pull into your story to talk about how you brought your designs to life. So, for example, when we're doing research or when we're presenting on research that we've done, we might start by sharing this question that our work is answering. So, in this case, it's what if this feeling had a shape? But your question might be different, or your why might be different. And so we can start out by sharing our why. My approach to design always starts with the why of blank. And from there, we can start sharing how we approached our research, how we approached our design work. And all of it comes down to where that exists in our creative voice. So let's actually get to the talking about our work part, right? What do we actually need to share? And maybe where does this pop up? So I'm going to be specifically talking about presentations right now or contexts where you're sharing information about your work out loud and maybe using visual aids to talk about your work. But we'll also talk about sharing your work online in a completely digital and text-based context in a minute. So when you're talking about your work, you want to know the answers to these three questions. It doesn't mean that you need to provide these answers all the time, but you want to know the answers to these three questions. So first and foremost, what is it? That's a super basic question. What is this thing that is my work? And that could be a very kind of direct and literal description, or it could be something more conceptual. Then our second question is, why did I make it? Was it inspired by a specific interaction that I had? Is it solving a design problem that I've identified, or maybe one that was given to me in the classroom? Is it something that was born out of lack of seeing it, but knowing that I felt that it was important that it existed? And then finally, what does it mean to me? What does this piece of work mean to me? And this seems like a really intense question, but there are a lot of ways in which your work can mean something to you that don't have to be related to the work being, deeply important to you personally, right? Your work could mean, if it's done for a course or a class project, your work might mean that you became a better designer through the course of the project by really refining your research skills. It might be the piece of work that really helps you hone your ability to prototype and then make design changes based on problems that you identified through the prototyping process. It might be the piece that helped you really understand the importance of collaboration and teamwork. Or on a much more personal note, it could be this piece that represents the type of work that I would like to do for the rest of my life, the way that I would like to make people feel when they engage with my work. It could be something that I find is, missing, but that is really important. It could be work that is sharing a story and speaking again to a area of advocacy or social concern that I feel is very, very important and that I want my work to represent. So when we look at that question, what does it mean to me? I want us to think a little bit bigger than like, this has to be important to me, but more so, how did it impact me in one way or another. So we also want to be able to explain a couple of whys, right? We want to explain the why behind our design decision. So that could be why you went with this specific shape language, why you used this particular material, why your character looks the way that it looks. A lot of that's going to come down to the research that you did. It's going to be, based on my research on costuming from these cultures, my character is wearing XYZ. Or based on my research about aerodynamics and ergonomics, the seat that I designed looks like this. But having a reason for your design decisions that isn't just, it looks great, which is a great reason, but not the only reason, is really, really helpful. You also, however, want to be able to explain why your specific approach is the right approach for the project that you're working on. And again, if that's an in-class project, you have a design brief. You're responding to a specific brief. And so your approach is going to be based on, again, the research that you've done or your specific creative voice responding to the brief itself. If we're talking about something that isn't a course project, a personal project that you're really passionate about, right? You're still answering essentially a design question or a creative question because you're creating something that didn't exist previously for a particular reason. We're going back again to why did I make it? What was the reason for me making this? And so there, we're going to focus a little bit on why your work is uniquely a fit to fill this space that was previously empty. So maybe if we think about a fine art project that gets people thinking about a series of really important life questions, we might be able to explain why this uniquely supports those questions when another project may also try to do the same thing. And then specifically, why is a design choice particularly effective or something that otherwise strengthens our pitch, our approach to design in a way that is uniquely better than other ideas? Now, the goal with this isn't for you to feel in competition with your peers. It's not for you to say or to feel my work is better than theirs and theirs is bad, but more so being able to share why you made the decisions that you did and why specifically they're uniquely effective for that goal that you had. And again, this is going to apply to some of our folks that are working in the fine arts, filling these spaces of like creative work and creative exploration that were previously empty. It's going to work as well for our entertainment design students, our entertainment arts students, our illustrators, who are essentially creating work that fills a specific area. It might be an area that they identify themselves for a particular reason. We're also going to want to go beyond the visible. Do you remember when I shared those 4 images and I said at the beginning, if I went to my friend and I said, this is a beach and this is a market and this is a sunset, again, we really want to watch out for the this is and the here is. If we're doing that, especially in, let's say, a presentation in class or in an interview or in a pitch, we're not adding anything to the discussion of our work and our materials that the designers, the audience, whoever it happens to be, can't see already. Especially when we're in a room full of designers. If we share a prototype with them or we share some hand sketches, they know exactly what that is, right? And what is the difference between you presenting that or sharing that out with them in person versus just sending them a slide deck or a set of images of your work? If we're only saying this is and here is, there's not a huge difference. But we are the presentation. We are the share out. We are the asset here. So instead, we want to focus a little bit more on sharing why that particular asset, that piece of our work, that aspect is impacting or elevating the design process, elevating the artistic process. So instead of saying, here's my prototype, here are some 3D sketches, this is a door, we might talk about how working on that specific asset helped us to solidify our design choices or helped us to identify a problem area that we were then able to solve or helped us to see the two-dimensional shapes that we had been exploring in 3D. If we're talking again for, let's say, our illustration students, our entertainment design students, our fine art students, we might be talking about how different aspects of a particular project we've worked on or a series of pieces that we've worked on are tied to each other, but are uniquely impactful on their own as well, and why they're all uniquely important. And finally, when we're sharing out about our work, again, whatever the context is, whether it's a presentation, an interview, whether we're talking with our friends or we're at grad show, whatever it happens to be, we want to make sure that we are ending our share out effectively. So ending, I'll say a presentation or a share out of your work lets you shape the audience's experience. It lets you direct a specific follow-up opportunity and allows you to leave a final impression that you feel confident and excited about. Why is this important? Shaping the audience's experience helps them to better understand your work. Like we talked about earlier, your audience isn't going to remember a specific image necessarily or a specific product. They're going to remember the story that you told, and wrapping up that story helps you shape how they feel about that story and the way that they engage with it. Directing a follow-up opportunity or a way to engage allows you to engage with people about your work on your terms. You might say, I'd love to hear feedback about this specific topic, or I would love to know what the set of images made you think of. When you looked at my photography series, what did it make you feel? Right? When we're able to wrap up and kind of give a specific pathway for following up, we're able to create continuous engagement, but also in a way that continues to support our own storytelling. And then finally, it lets you leave a really nice final impression. If you've ever heard somebody talk about their work and they kind of abruptly stop, there's no kind of wind down, you know that it sort of feels like walking up a mountain or a hill and then getting to the top, and then there's just a sheer rock face on the other side. We kind of work our way up slowly. We can't just plummet to the ground on the way down. We need to walk our way down slowly as well. So leaving that final impression of, and here's what I would love for you to know about me, my creative voice, what I can bring to this project or to your team or to the creative world in general, whatever the context is that you're sharing your work. You're creating that final impression by wrapping up really effectively in whatever way your story needs a wrap up. Now, let's talk a little bit about confidence, right? And then we're going to turn a little bit to talking about our work online. So a lot of folks that I work with specifically share that confidence and comfort in public speaking or in talking about their work in non-traditional contexts is a huge barrier for them. It's maybe the biggest fear or the kind of self-critic in them that stops them from feeling awesome about it. So confidence in your work comes from knowing what you do really well. It comes from knowing the, again, creative voice that you have, the story that you're telling with that creative voice, but also comes from knowing where you excel. Maybe what you excel in is the research that helps you make informed design decisions. Maybe it comes from the social commentary that you're making with your work. Maybe it comes from the feeling that you want people to have when they look at your work or engage with your work. But what you do well hugely impacts where that confidence comes from. You should also, though, be seeking out your champions. So that's your faculty who want you to thrive and who give you constructive critical feedback, not overly critical, but constructively critical feedback. That's the creative careers team who's excited to see your work and chat with you about it. It might also be the writing center and other folks who could help you figure out what words or phrases you want to use to talk about your work that feels right and correct for you. And then finally, knowing your why. Coming back to that creative voice, knowing why you do what you do, why it's something that you want to do professionally, and where that inspiration comes from is going to be a huge way to build that confidence and feel confident knowing that your work is supporting that creative voice in the long run. Confidence in presenting, that comes from practice. I know we don't want to think about it, but it comes from practice, right? When presenting, when sharing out, and I want just to use the word presenting, but when sharing out about our work in, again, an interview, in-class presentation, at grad show, for those of you that are preparing to graduate, that confidence comes from comfort. The comfort of, I know what I'm about to share. I know this like the back of my hand. This material, I could present it without my slide deck, without this grad show wall behind me, without all of my assets developed. That knowledge that we have, that comes from practice. The more that we do something, the more repetitive we feel about it, the more it gets kind of baked into us. um, and the more we know it like the back of our hand, the more we feel like I already know what's on the next slide for me, or I already know what I want to say about this particular piece when somebody comes up to ask me about it, or I already know why this is important for me to share in this particular pitch meeting. So please remember, one of the most important parts of talking about your work, feeling that confidence, knowing your story is practicing. The more you practice, you're going to identify potential problems or discomfort in the way that you're describing things, which you can then fix and resolve. The more you practice, you're going to become more familiar with the material, which lets you feel off the cuff, ready to talk about these things. And the more you practice, the more you just develop the ability to know, I'm talking about myself and my work. The most important thing is that I know why I've done this. I know why I've done this. I know why it's important. And I can communicate that to you because I've done this a bunch of times and I know the answers to those questions. So let's talk a little bit about sharing your work online.
Yes, thank you, Eilish, for sharing all that. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about sharing your work online, and this could be within your portfolio website, this could be on social media, your LinkedIn, any sort of like online platform. So when we talk about sharing your work online, we're really referencing like showing your process. Your process could refer to your research, your sketches, your 3D models, your prototypes, to showcase not just what you designed, but how you designed it, the thought process that goes within how you got to that end result. And one way we could think about this is using like this sandwich method. When we refer to this method, it's thinking about sharing the images of your work like a sandwich. So the final design assets first, your research and process kind of like in the middle. If like we want to think like a meat sandwich, that's going to be like your meat. And then lastly, if you have it on bread, that's going to be your final design assets again at the end. So that's one way to think about this sandwich method. And then lastly, again, all of this is about providing context to what got you to that end result, that final prototype. It's essentially explaining the design, the problem you're solving, and essentially why it's working. And
So
with that, I'm gonna go with Eilish. There you go.
thank you so much. So with
Yeah.
that, We're going to practice what we preach, and we're going to wrap up this presentation and open up the floor for any questions or any thoughts that anybody has with a nice little short workshop today. So first and foremost, tell your story, right? Know your story and know what story you want to tell in order to tell it. One way to do that is by knowing your creative voice. Get reflective about yourself, about your work, about why you're doing what you're doing anytime you can. That's something that we can help you with. Both Kayla and I take appointments to chat with students about why they do what they do and how to develop that creative voice and that content for themselves. Um, so you don't have to know now, and it is something that will grow and be shaped with you in the long run. But knowing your creative voice is a huge step in feeling that level of confidence. Next, use your share out to shape your audience's perception. So I'm using share out here to talk about whatever context you're sharing your work in. That could be online, as Kayla just mentioned, but it could be in person, it could be in an interview, it could be at a portfolio review. Use that opportunity to shape your audience's perception about why you do what you do, why it's important, and why it is unique within the context of your art and design field. Next, practice talking about your work. Please, please, please practice talking about your work and your own story in these different contexts. Again, think about how it appears online when you're sharing your work on a portfolio or on LinkedIn, and then maybe how that might be different than sharing your work in person in an interview or in a presentation or at grad show. What are some of those nuances and how do we prepare for both? And again, that's something that we can help you with as a team. And finally, give yourself time and grace to get better at this process. For those of you who are in the first, let's say, half to 2/3 of your time at Art Center, you will already have reflected on and honed in your creative voice probably half a dozen times by now in tiny, small ways, maybe even small enough that you haven't noticed them yet. You will continue to do that. But at the same time, you will continue to hone your ability to talk about your work every time that you go through that reflective process. This is something that can be as simple as taking time at the end of every term to say, how did my approach to my work change this term? Did it change at all? If so, how and why? Maybe was there a specific project or a specific class that helped me identify, like, oh, wow, this is really important to me. This particular process or this aspect is really important to me because of this work that I did. That, again, continuous reflection helps you hone your creative voice, helps you identify what your story is, helps you figure out what do I want people to know about me and my work when I'm talking with them about it. So with that, I'll say thank you all so much for joining us today for this short little chat about owning your story, about feeling ways to feel confident in your work, talking about yourself and your work. Does anybody have any questions or concerns as we wrap up our chat for today? Again, you can drop them in the chat if you would like. You can also unmute yourself and ask out loud. Just note that we're recording. So any questions that you ask out loud will be recorded, but we're happy to answer any questions or thoughts that you have.
Great. Thank you so much for this presentation today. It's been super helpful. I do have a question. I was wondering if I do need extra practice to, let's say, present for midterm or final, can I come see you guys and present with you guys?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you for asking, Michelle. Absolutely. You can schedule an appointment with us. If you go to our website, artcentercc.com, you'll find a link to get to our online advising platform where you can schedule an appointment. I would recommend, if you're interested in practicing with us, which we love and we're fully in support of, plan in advance when you would like to meet with us to go over your presentation. Sometimes we can be booked up to 2 weeks in advance. And if you have a specific deadline by which you would like to present or which you need to present your work or talk about your work, we want to make sure that you have the ability to come in and meet with us. But yes, we would absolutely love to help you practice these skills. We can even help you hone some of the aspects of your presentation in terms of the story you want to tell as well. Great question.
All right, thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else have any other questions or concerns or thoughts? Again, you can feel free to drop them in the chat if you would not like to say them out loud. Okay. All right. Well, if we don't have any further questions, I would like to say thank you everyone so much for joining us today. You can find all of our contact information and hours on the screen in front of you. You can reach us by email or by phone or tune into our website where we have a whole bunch of resources on all topics related to your creative career development, but particularly about, getting to really understand yourself well, talking about your work, etc. Those can all be found on our website. Because we're recording this workshop, it will be posted on our YouTube channel, and we'll send out an email to everybody who has attended today with a link to the recording, so you'll be able to access it there. And we'll make sure to include a couple of little activities and additional resources that we think would be really helpful for folks who maybe want to, begin to get started on this particular process. There'll also be a link to schedule an advising appointment in there as well. If anybody has any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us by email. We'd love to chat with you or pop into the office on the days that we're there, Tuesday through Thursday. Thanks everybody so much for joining us today. Thank you so much, Kayla, for presenting with me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.